Now, this is a case where we've gotten bits and pieces of what the evidence is because prosecutors have played it very close, and there's still an ongoing murder investigation taking place. So they're not showing all their cards to the public, and at this point, not even showing all their cards to the defendants in these cases, Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell. But today, this week, we're getting some more indications of what some of this evidence may be because there was a big hearing involving DNA evidence and DNA testing. Take a listen.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll go on the record now. Let's make sure we have our court reporter. Mr. Fuller, are you there? Very well, thank you. This is Fremont County KCR 222755, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. Mr. Daybell is represented by his attorney, John Pryor. This is the time we have scheduled for a hearing on the defendant's motions, motion to oppose use of and motion to preserve DNA samples, motion for photographic recording of serology samples and other visual tests, and motion to review lab records. Before we started this hearing, I discussed the matter off the record with counsel, Mr. Pryor and Mr. Wood. The state did file a response to the motion indicating that it didn't entirely object to some of the issues in the motion. Counsel has agreed to try to see if this issue can be resolved through stipulation, and there are some additional issues that we're going to need to find out from the state lab in order to potentially reach a stipulation. And so in order to allow time for that, it's my understanding the parties have agreed that we should continue today's hearing with the proviso that the state would agree to refrain at this time from any consumptive testing of any evidence in its custody at this time. In other words, any testing that would completely consume the evidence, leaving it unavailable for examination by the defense. And then we could bring the case up again or potentially not have to hear the motion on the basis of a stipulation. So that's what I understand we intend to do today. Mr. Pryor, does that recitation I just gave comport with your understanding of where we are today?
It does, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wood and Ms. Smith. On behalf of the state, are we okay to continue this matter?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Very well. And again, Mr. Wood, as I mentioned, obviously part of that agreement is that the state would refrain from any consumptive testing until this issue is sorted out. Counsel, if you need to have a hearing on this, just contact the court and we can do that potentially even on an expedited basis if necessary. I think that's all we've got for today. Then is there any other issue we need to bring up, Mr. Wood or Ms. Smith from the state?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Means, anything further today?
No, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. Thank you. May I be excused?
You may. Thanks, counsel.
Like I said, they're not making a lot of stuff very public, but there are also some court filings associated with what you just saw. And we're talking about DNA, and it looks like there's two potential places where this DNA was recovered from. Let's bring in our special guest, joining us, retired police commander, host of Profiling Evil, and the global director for emergency communications and fraud at ESRI, Mike King. He's also the author of Deceived, an investigation memoir of the Zion Society cult. And that word cult plays very large in this case. Mike, let me start here, Mike, just big picture. I mean, you, in your career, investigated this cult. You're very familiar with the inner workings on how they do what they do. Looking at this case, we call it the Doomsday Couple. We called her the Doomsday Cult Mom. What are your thoughts about the cult aspect of the investigation of Chad and Lori Daybell?
Well, exactly fits this idea of a destructive cult, a group that comes together and nothing good comes out of it. It's all about the leader, or in this case, Vinny, the leaders. And it's interesting how the doomsday thing and this idea that you can tell all these people who believe in this ideology that they somehow are special and have additional light and knowledge than others kind of keeps them hooked in and keeps them going forward and believing in the philosophy, because it makes them just a little bit better than the rest of us.
So do you think, and this is an ongoing murder investigation for these two children, Tylee and JJ, no murder charges. I mean, two bodies are found in Chad Daybell's backyard. Do you think, from your knowledge of cults, are there other people that could be associated with Lori and Chad who may know what exactly happened, where the children were taken or where they went or how they died? Because Lori and Chad don't look like one is going to flip on the other. Lori is the mother. She should know where her children are. Chad had a backyard where the children were buried. He should know how two bodies of his stepchildren or future stepchildren, because I think they died before they got married, got buried in his backyard. Would there be other people in the cult who might have that information?
Yeah, I think it's really possible. Number one, we have to look at Alex, who is obviously deceased now. Interestingly, that he dies right after all of this. All of the people around are starting to fall off. If they had shared anything with anyone, those people ought to be contacting law enforcement right away, because the chances are not too good that you're going to be hanging around in the way this kind of group's going.
It's unreal. And you talk about Alex. Alex Cox is Lori's brother, and you know his name was linked to a bunch of things, and we know for sure that he killed Lori's brother. I mean, he claimed self-defense. It was never charged. That was an ongoing investigation until he mysteriously died. All right, let's talk about this hearing. Let's talk about this hearing right now. DNA from, it looks like, two sources from some of the court filings. What's your take and the significance of this DNA evidence they were talking about in court?
Yeah, I thought Prosecutor Wood really tipped his hand just a little bit here, and it's pretty exciting to see that the bench is getting a little stronger. We know that there's blood at least on an apartment somewhere. Whose apartment? That didn't come out. And on the tools at Daybell's house. So is there DNA on the tools that is consistent with Chad and the children? Is it consistent with Alex and the children? Is somebody else their DNA going to pop up on here? And that's where we really start to see this thing start to get bigger and bigger. And I'm like you, I keep kind of scratching my head wondering when the other shoe's going to fall, because I don't believe this case is ending with just desecration of children.
Right. I mean, the children did not die of natural causes. It was not an accident. It was not suicide, okay? This is homicide, and someone is responsible. Getting back to the DNA, the blood that's found in an apartment. Now, we don't know where, and that's a big fact, finding out where this blood is from and who the blood belongs to. In this case, there are two key apartments that could be a crucial location if it's associated with this blood, which would be Lori Vallow's apartment and her brother's apartment, which were in that same complex.
Yeah, I got to agree. Or did it somehow end up at a neighbor's apartment, transferring somehow, going over to get JJ when he's out playing with the neighbor kid or something like that? I mean, this thing's really getting interesting. And again, I think we're really starting to see the prosecution's bench here. And again, whoever knows something, and I believe there are people, Vinny, that know more. This zombie idea wasn't unique to 2 or 3 people, and those folks ought to be contacting police or looking over their shoulder a whole bunch.
Now, are you surprised that Lori and Chad are sitting in jail? They're in no rush to go to trial yet. The doomsday has come and passed. How do you think that's impacted them? The fact that there was a date last summer that it was all supposed to end, and it didn't. And here we are, almost a year past the doomsday, and they're still alive and they're still locked up.
You know, I saw that with the Zion Society cult. I saw it with Warren Jeffs, and actually in many cults, doomsdays come and go. And almost always it's because the followers just weren't worthy enough. And the prophet has to step up and say, man, if you all were just a little more faithful, we could have got there. Now we're going to have to wait for God to tell us the next doomsday.
There's always an excuse, right? There's always...
Yeah, it's crazy.
The doom will come back. We're looking right now at some aerials of where the children were buried in the backyard. To me, again, they haven't been very public with all of the evidence here, just what we can glean from these court appearances and some of the filings made by both sides. But I've got to think there's a lot of significant evidence there, but are you surprised that there's not enough yet where they are confident with murder charges against anyone?
You know, I'd love your opinion on this, because I keep thinking, number one, maybe the idea is let's not bring up the murder charges now, because they're going to try to make the lower and lesser offenses inclusive and maybe start the clock over. So maybe they want to get evidence locked in and in front of a jury and solid, so that the next step along the way, if someone's not available to testify or something, they've got that. That's the only thing I can think of. Or frankly, they're just being really systematic and putting an incredible case together.
Yeah, we shall see. Lori Vallows, she's got a trial date this summer for one of her cases, and the other two look like they're pushing it off to next year already. But Mike King, host of Profiling Evil, check it out on YouTube. Also check out the book, The Investigation Memoir of the Zion Society Cult. Thanks so much on this Friday night,
Thanks,
sir.
Vinny.